Six-time NBA world champion with an unforgettable NBA career, finishing with 19 All-Star selections, 6 MVPs, and finishing with 38,387 points, the most in history. Regarded as one of the greatest professional basketball players of all time, he's also a best-selling author, a businessman, father, educator, cancer survivor, human rights activist, journalist, Presidential Medal of Freedom Award recipient, also a global cultural ambassador for the United States. K-State family, Manhattan, get up on your feet and give it up for the man, the legend, Mr. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Well, we have an hour of time to ask questions to Mr. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and we're going to get right straight into it. Kansas State University was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s last university speech before his assassination. We have a week-long celebration honoring his legacy. The main street coming into campus is named after Dr. King, and his son, Martin Luther King Jr. III, visited just 2 weeks ago. In a past interview, you mentioned if you were not an athlete, you would have been a journalist, and you had the opportunity to interview Dr. King. Tell us what that was like.
Well, when I was in high school, between my junior and senior year, I took part in a mentoring program that was designed to try to challenge the kids of Harlem to make Harlem a better place. So it was open to high school kids to come and work in various workshops that would allow them to pursue what they felt was their life's calling. And if they could go and study on these things and bring that knowledge back to Harlem, it would make Harlem a better place, and it would be about progress. So the person who started this program was Dr. John Henrik Clark, who was a sociologist and a black historian, and a very capable person. And he was friends with Dr. King, and he invited Dr. King to come and address the participants in the program. So I was involved in a journalism workshop. You just heard Sheila mention how I've always been interested in being a journalist. By the time I was in high school, I had really gotten into maybe that should be what I was going to do. And because of that, being in the journalism workshop gave me the opportunity to cover the event. I was given press credentials, and I covered the event with the National Press Corps. Dr. King had been voted Man of the Year by Time magazine the year before that. And the press corps followed him everywhere because the civil rights movement at that point in 1964 was coming to a head. The possibility of the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act were very real, and there was a lot of public attention around Dr. King. So Dr. King came and addressed us, told us that our community was really what was going to make or break our lives. And if we could improve our communities, we would be doing a very good thing. And after he addressed the participants in the program, he did a press conference. And at that press conference, I got to ask Dr. King a question, and he took time to look me in the eye and answer my question. And just that encounter with Dr. King, where he told me, he said, I asked Dr. King what he thought of the program that Dr. Clark had started, and Dr. King said it already was a success because we were already thinking about how we could make Harlem a better place, and he expected good things to come from it. And I think that summer really changed my life because it helped me understand the importance of my community and of my relationship to my community and what was I going to be in my community, a positive force or a negative force. It really helped me to sort all of that out and decide what I wanted to do with my life.
Well, I also found an interesting quote from you on Martin Luther King Day, and I will read it. Recent events make clear that the disease of racism is still infecting our culture, and that Martin Luther King Jr. Day needs to be a rallying cry to continue fighting the disease, rather than just a pat on the back for what's been accomplished. What do you think Dr. King would think of the current state of racial relations in America today?
Well, I think that Dr. King would be very pleased at the progress that has been made. There has been absolutely a lot of progress that has been made, but he would be disappointed by the backsliding that has occurred and that has made it impossible for us to keep moving forward. Anything that gets in the way of progress was something that Dr. King would point out and tell us that we needed to fix.
Even here at K-State, there have been racial tensions and a series of racial incidents. How can we use days like MLK Day, Black History Month even, to promote change and action? And what advice do you have for students on promoting change, not just on those days, but year-round?
Well, I think you can use Black History Month and certain holidays to promote more communication. It's the fact that so many segments of our society don't talk to each other. So many neighborhoods don't talk to each other. So many communities don't talk to each other and are unfamiliar with their neighbors. So we have to get a better understanding of who our neighbors are in all of our communities. It's not just the people that think the way that you think. There are a lot of different opinions. There are a lot of different ideas about how the future of America can unfold. And we have to get everybody's opinion, and everybody's voice has to be heard. So the fact that we can communicate with various communities has been a real positive factor. I know for myself as a Muslim, all of the hostility that has been raised against Muslims in general because of the barbaric actions of people like ISIS and Daesh over in the Middle East. But there's also been a lot of reaching out. So, for example, last year when the Jewish cemetery in St. Louis was ransacked by racists, the Muslim community in St. Louis helped the Jewish community repair that cemetery and fix the damage that had been done. And a bridge was made. So we have that potential here in America. We can make bridges. We don't live in the Middle East where people who, with very sinister ulterior motives, don't let communities communicate with each other. We live in America. We can talk to our neighbors. We can find out who they are. And usually what you find out is they're just like every other American. They want their family to have an opportunity for the American dream. That's why we're all here. And I think that's what it's all about.
Athletes and activism has been a thing that has really kind of come back to the forefront. And of course, you know, in back-to-back years, back in the 60s, there were two prominent moments where athletes really took that activism step. You had the 67 Ali Summit after Ali had decided that he would not go to Vietnam after being drafted, and you were a part of that. And then we have the 68 Black Power protests at the Mexico City Olympics in 68, which you actually boycotted. Things seemed to go dormant for a time until faces of the sport like a LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Paul, they decided to start speaking out on these issues after the deaths of Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown. What do you think took so long for that to happen?
Well, I think that basically once the achievements of the civil rights movement were realized, people in the black communities were focused on the economic upheaval that had worried all of us. We were a lot more worried about our economic survival than any specific civil or human rights. But once that period got past us, we had to focus on something else that was a lot more divisive. So I think that all of the negative influences in our society, the subtle racism and all of those things, people are becoming more aware of that, and we're not talking about it, so it's becoming more and more of a problem.
When looking at the four major sports, and even college, because it's, networks and all the money that they generate, they're just as big as the pro sports now. It seems like the NFL has the biggest platform and has had the most pushback when it comes to athletes speaking out on these social issues, especially from President Donald Trump. When Colin Kaepernick began his protest in the summer of 2016, were you surprised by it? And what do you think of his current lawsuit with the NFL right now?
Well, I wasn't surprised at all by Colin Kaepernick's protest. All you have to do is watch the film of the killing of Tamir Rice in Cleveland, and you will understand what Colin was talking about. And I think the pushback against him was as severe as it was because he would not stop what he was doing. He would not leave the issue alone because it's an important issue to him. And it's a lot more important than his job was. And he realized that he was risking his job, but he had something important to say, and he said what he had to say. So I have a lot of respect for him for that. I think that he will get a good hearing because the Players Union will represent him well, and it seems to me it's pretty obvious that there was collusion among the owners to keep him from having a job, just because they didn't like his politics. But the way he expressed himself really is the key. He wasn't doing anything to disrupt the game, but he was making people aware of something before the game. And people who did not like that subject being brought up on Sunday morning at an NFL game decided that they would try to stop him by doing what they did. They were effective in stopping him in the short term, but his movement has caught on among the NFL players because all of the black players in the in the NFL have seen some aspect of American racism, and they all have issues that they have that they want to discuss and they want to be fixed. And this is going to continue to have the athletes continue to protest. So I think it's going to be futile for the owners to try to shut the players up, and they're going to have to accept some type of demonstrations by them because they have every right to talk about what's wrong with America. That's the only way that we get to fix it.
You converted to Islam while you were in college, but you officially changed your name from Lou Alcindor to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the summer of '71. Being in a Midwestern city like Milwaukee that was still dealing in the aftermath of some racial tensions in the late 60s and early 70s, and from the time that you were there to when you got traded to the Los Angeles Lakers in '75, were you getting some of that racially charged backlash that athletes are getting today?
I think I was very fortunate to be in Milwaukee because they really didn't have an opinion, and they were going to watch me and see what I was all about. So I was not running around trying to call all white people devils. That is not what Islam is about. That's not what I'm about. Islam is about tolerance, and it's supposed to be about peace, and I tried to live my life that way. So they gave me a little pass to see what I was all about. I wasn't political like Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali eventually became an Orthodox Muslim, and he eventually started to speak about the fact that no, not all white people were devils, not all black people are divine. We have a great admixture of both in every racial identity that you can find, devils and angels, and that's just the human condition. So I think people in Milwaukee realized that and gave me a break, and I didn't let them down.
How has being Muslim in America changed from the 1960s and 1970s to 2018?
Well, I think after 9/11, people started to see Islam as a threat. Basically, what it's all about is if you live in the Middle East, and you have aspirations to get married or get a good job, you're screwed. The rulers over there do not build roads and hospitals and universities. They take the money that their countries produce and put it in their pockets. So the mismanagement of their countries have created this enormous amount of anger and frustration among the populations over there, and their leaders tell them that it's our fault, the people here in the West. It's the fault of people in the United States. Well, it's not. But they buy this because in their state, they don't have access to valid information. The only information they get is what they're told by these people who are authoritarian despots. So they end up becoming radicalized and blaming our society for the faults of their society. And that's why they're against Americans and against the West. But this is a very hard thing for some people to understand. I think the only way that we can overcome this for Muslims in America is for every Muslim in America to understand that they have to reach out to people who are not Muslim and let them understand what Islam is really all about. If they can do that, we can change this, and we don't have to have bans on Muslim immigration or anything like that. It's not necessary. Certain things need to be fixed.
I know I'm gonna hand it back over to Sheila real quick, but I'm sure everybody is wondering the same question, and I'm gonna jump on the grenade for everybody and ask it. Do you think we're going to get a fourth straight NBA Finals with the Golden State Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers? You were all wondering.
Well, I would have to say that Cleveland doesn't look too good this year. You know, LeBron has a very steady career path, and he's still playing at the top level, but the other aspects of the Cleveland franchise seem to be failing at this point with injuries, and they lost a really good player in Kyrie Irving. So I don't think it's going to be Golden State and Cleveland, but I do think it's going to be Golden State and somebody.
Maybe the Boston Celtics.
Could be.
So I just had to get that in there. Go Celtics.
Now back to the serious questions. Okay. Well, you told me to call you Kareem backstage.
Please.
Mr. Kareem, you are an advocate. Just can't. You are an advocate for women's rights and equal pay. Why do you think it's important for women to receive equal pay as men? And in your opinion, what is needed for us to achieve gender equality here in the U.S.?
Well, I think that Dr. King really stated it very plainly. And unless all of us eat, none of us eat. So people who are in oppressed groups, like Black Americans and women, they need to help each other. So that's what I'm talking about. What women finally got across to the nation is something that Black Americans understood the whole time about women being raped and oppressed and threatened by men. It's the same thing that happens to Black Americans with the police department that nobody wanted to believe until we could get a film of Rodney King being beaten, and then that was followed by other films of other Black Americans being beaten and killed for no good reason. Once that information got out there, people's attitudes changed about what Black people had been saying for over 100 years, that the police departments treat us differently. So we share something very common with women, that people do not want to believe Blacks when they say that the police treat us differently. Finally, it's gotten across. Thank heaven that women finally got this issue across, and thank heaven that Black Americans got this issue across. Hopefully now we can do something to change it. We need better training for our police officials. I don't know, I've referred to this before, the killing of Tamir Rice. If you see it, it's incredible. The police officer jumps out of the car and shoots a 12-year-old boy dead, doesn't say, police, put down the gun, put up your hands. Nothing is said. He just jumps out of the car and executes this little boy. He was 12 years old. That is not the way that police are supposed to treat kids. and it is not the way that police are supposed to act in the United States of America. My father was a police officer. I know what I'm talking about here. So we got some work to do.
You refer to the Obama effect in your book, Writings on the Wall, Searching for a New Equality Beyond Black and White. You talk about Barack Obama becoming the first Black president, which was definitely a milestone for our country. And then moving forward to today, what impact do you think Obama has had on America?
Well, President Obama was our first black president. President Clinton was our first kind of black president.
True.
I had to mention that in there. But I think the Obama effect was twofold. It gave us all something to feel good about with regard to it being a milestone, that America could get to the point where it would elect a Black American president twice. And he did an incredible job. I remember he was giving a State of the Union address, and a Republican congressman called him a liar. If we had to call our president a liar every time he opened his mouth, we wouldn't be able to hear anything from this dude, right? Seems to me that there's a double standard in effect. But I think the Obama effect was, geez, we've come a long way. Yes, we have. But it also enabled people to negatively try to say that racism is done in America and that it doesn't affect our lives. It still affects our lives very much. But we have made progress. And I think both of those really are the Obama effects that I was referring to.
Also in your book, you mentioned the term wallpaper racism. You describe implicit and explicit racism. Tell us the difference between implicit and explicit racism and how we can battle the less visible implicit racism that plagues our country.
Well, you know, explicit racism is the things that are in your face. People who are unapologetic about telling you that they don't like you because of the color of your skin, or something to that effect. It's people using the N-word, people just physically confronting you or telling you that you can't rent an apartment because they don't like the way you look. The stuff that I call wallpaper racism is the subtle type of racism. The type of racism that sees that your name is Jamal, so they don't want to process your job application. Or the different voter suppression efforts where people who don't have very accurate documentation about their birth record can't get the right to vote in certain states. And again, it's usually people of color. It's all the subtle little things that are used to keep people of color from being treated like everyone else. That is what I call the wallpaper racism. It's very subtle, but it's also very effective.
What do you think that we can do, you know, to kind of combat that wallpaper racism that is so subtle?
In order to combat the wallpaper racism, we have to point it out. We have to explain how it is subtly but effectively making our lives miserable, making certain people's lives miserable. I'll give you an example. A man takes a suit to the cleaners, he's charged $3.95. A woman takes her suit to the cleaners, she's charged $6.95. And she's told, hey, well, you know, you've got more buttons or a different type of lapel on it, and we have to charge you more. And that's blatant discrimination against women just because their clothes are a little bit different from men. And women have been going along with this for a long time. It's starting to change now. And this is an aspect of people just seeing where their rights are being stepped on and they're not going to take it anymore. We have to get everybody who's having this experience to figure that out and do something about it. If you speak up, the people can't hide behind your complacency, and things will change.
Kareem, we live in a 24-hour news cycle, and you can even make the case that it's even a 12 to 16-hour news cycle because just the news, especially in this current climate, just goes by so fast. It seemed like there was a turning point in the 2016 election where you were getting so much thrown at you, whether it was, real or fake news, and how we received this information and how we made the decisions from that. Do you think we're too far off the cliff at this point to fix this obviously broken strategy?
Geez, I don't think we're too far off the cliff to fix it, but we have to understand what's going on. Let me get this right now. If we're going to fix what's happening, we have to understand that we need to think rational. We have to teach rational thinking so that the fake news and these overblown, ridiculous conspiracy theories, they won't have any influence on us because we'll see through them right away. If we can't teach, that type of thinking, it's going to be tough because our kids are going to accept really ridiculous premises just because somebody's with authority is telling them that the sky is red. And we know that's not the case. But they'll listen to that if they don't understand logical thinking. So we've got to really promote that and make sure that our kids understand that that's what they should be doing so that no one can come up to them and tell them lies and they're just so unaware that they accept them.
In your book, Writings on the Wall, you dedicate the final chapter for advice for Generation Z. A quote that I really love from the book is you say, "College is about crafting character one decision at a time." What is one decision that you made in college that crafted your character and who you are today?
Geez, I think it had to do with my English class. I had a creative writing class, and we all had to submit our final essays for our grades. And they picked my essay as the best one in the class. I was shocked, and I was like, maybe I should do this at some point in my life. But of course, I had the NBA to go up in front of me, but I managed not to let go of that dream. And after I stopped playing in the NBA and was trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life, all of that came back to me as the right path, and it's gone very well for me. So I'm very thankful for my college experience. It really has changed my life and made me a complete human being. And I wouldn't have been that if I had only my athletic career to sustain me. So I feel I'm very fortunate.
Do you have any specific advice for college students?
My specific advice to college students is be patient, you'll figure it out. It's very hard when you're a freshman or a sophomore because you don't know what really motivates you and you're too busy doing all these other things other than figuring out what should be your major. We've all gone through that. Even brilliant scholars like Bill Bradley, who was a Rhodes Scholar, played in the NBA. He didn't know what he wanted to do. He ended up being a United States Senator. But it took him a while to figure that out. But as you go through college, things become clear to you, what motivates you, what your passions are, and you figure it out. So just be patient. It'll happen at the right time. And plus, your parents can't afford to send you to college for 6 years. So do the right thing.
You have such a deep love and just a deep passion for history. Where did that come from? And you're so worldly with everything that you've done. What are you reading now that maybe you could tip us off to? Any new ventures?
Well, my passion for history really comes from where I was raised in New York City. Northern Manhattan was a Revolutionary War battlefield. And when I was a kid on the hillsides, the part of Manhattan, it's called Inwood, it would rain and we'd find like old whiskey bottles from when New York was a Dutch colony. We'd find musket balls and arrowheads. And there was a battle that was fought there. It was the last part of Manhattan that was held by the revolutionary forces. George Washington escaped across the Hudson River and down into Valley Forge from that part of Manhattan. But I was aware of it, and all my life I was aware that things had happened before I got here, and they were still affecting my life. So it was a very historically rich neighborhood that I grew up in, and history just had that appeal to me.
You tell kids to pursue their basketball dreams, but not let basketball be the only dream that they have. The Skyhook Foundation's mission is to give kids a shot that can't be blocked. It's by bringing educational STEM opportunities to underserved communities. Can you tell us more about the foundation and how people who may be interested in it can get involved?
Well, my foundation works with the Los Angeles Unified School District. They have a facility up in the mountains above Los Angeles where kids can go up there to camp. So we have a program set up where we take 80 kids a week, we send them to the camp for 4 nights and 5 days, and they do hands-on STEM experiments, STEM being science, technology, engineering, and math. We know that those 4 subjects are the foundation for good jobs in the 21st century. And if kids are exposed to them before they get to the point where they're overly affected by popular culture and peer pressure, if they get an idea of where the good jobs are and start understanding that if they pay attention in chemistry class, and if they pay attention in physics, and if they pay attention in math class, they can have a great job and do whatever they want with their lives. And some of them are starting to get it. We've had a very good reaction from the LA Unified School District. They want to keep the program going. We have a 3 or 4 year waiting list to send kids up there. We send about 4,000 kids a year up there. So that's what it's all about, and it's having a pretty positive effect. We're hoping we can figure out a way to follow some of the kids to see who the ones are that end up having really outstanding jobs as they mature and get out of college and go on into engineering or whatever it is that they're going to do for their lives. Thank you.
And we have one more question for you. In your book, you talk about the need for education reform and how education has been seen traditionally as the great economic equalizer. However, many economically disadvantaged people, racial and ethnic minorities, don't have access to the best education in schools, and possibly lack of parental support and money is still a huge barrier for college access. What is your advice on how we can fix this problem?
That's a difficult one, and it requires the assistance of the state or city, municipal governments to get an idea of where the schools are failing and how to get them some help. And families need help. There's too many single-parent families that can't do the extra work that enables kids to do better. So we got to figure out, good mentoring and tutoring programs for kids, and that will require more funds. So we have to really look to dedicating more funds to education, especially in the inner city where the need is so great. And I hope a way, municipalities and states really figure out a way to improve the school system, because it's really the school system that has been the strength of America it used to make America #1 in the world for all of the key subjects that that deal with progress and a really good economic growth. And that's not happening in our country now. The alarm bells should be going off so that we pay attention to that problem and spend the money and the personnel to fix it. There's too many people going to work in corporate America that should be in the classroom teaching.
Well, we want to thank you so much for
My pleasure.
coming here to K-State and taking your time with us this evening. I know I've gained a lot of insight and perspective from talking with you. And right now, we are going to go ahead and open it up for question and answer. Really quickly, a little bit of housekeeping. There are 4 microphone stands here, and we will need to keep the questions succinct and on topic, as we will only have a limited amount of time to address these questions. We also reserve the right to cut off any questions if they are not on topic or unrelated. So we'll go ahead and open up the floor for questions for Mr. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Should we start with microphone number 5 or microphone number 8?
We can start 5.
Let's start with 5.
Five.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry, I had the flu earlier. My question is, where did you get your socks?
Where?
Nice.
These are Bruin socks.
There's a few of them up here.
I had a really good experience at UCLA, so sometimes I wear my socks. No offense meant. I was telling everybody earlier that Bob Boozer was my teammate in Milwaukee when we won the World Championship. I got nothing against K-State.
Thank you, Kareem.
You're welcome. Number 6.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, it's rather obvious to you that this one and done for college basketball is just not working, okay? If it was entirely up to you, which would you prefer to have happen instead? 1, have high school basketball players jump directly to the NBA. 2, do like baseball does and have high school players that are drafted go to the NBA or stay in college for 3 years, or 3, require that all high school seniors complete at least their 4 years of eligibility in college before they are drafted by the NBA. Thank you very much.
I think that requiring that they wait 4 years that's not fair. If I had total power, I would change the age from 19 to 21. You had to be 21 years old to play in the NBA. If you wanted to come out earlier out of high school, you could play in the developmental league, where you could build up the skills and the work ethic to play in the NBA. Or if you have an associate degree, you can go directly into the NBA. That way, that high school kids wouldn't, there are high school kids that are pretty good athletes that are sitting around right now thinking that if I'm a junior or senior in high school, I'm only like a year or 2 away from millions of dollars. And it really distorts their thinking. And they think that, if they can shoot a three-pointer or dunk a basketball, there's millions coming to them. I think this is a disservice to them. But all of this is determined by the NBA Players Association. They determine the age of guys coming into the league, and it's up to them. I think, by making it possible for one and done, they've really done a disservice to both college basketball and professional basketball, because college basketball can't keep its talent, and the NBA ends up getting inexperienced guys who have no idea of what they need to learn. They have to come into the NBA and sit on the bench for 3 or 4 years before they learn the game sufficiently to contribute to a professional team. So it's not working, just as you mentioned. I hope they figure out a way to fix it, because it's gotten ridiculous. Look at what happened to my alma mater this year. It was embarrassing, and I hope they figure out a better way. It's absolutely necessary. Thank you for your question.
7, right here.
Hi, Kareem. Thanks for your time. You're arguably one of the most dominant NBA players in NBA history, and I think the skyhook attributed to that. At what point did you realize that the skyhook, your move, was unstoppable, and who taught you that? How did you come up with that, the skyhook move?
I learned how to shoot the hook shot when I was starting in the 5th grade. A guy gave me a drill that was used by George Mikan, and I started working on that when I was in grade school. And I had it down by the time I was in the 8th grade. By the time I was in the 8th grade, I was like 6'9", and I could play against guys that were college players and make that hook shot against them. I knew that would do me well. So I had it before they eliminated the dunk shot. Everybody thinks that the dunk shot, the elimination of the dunk shot forced me to shoot the hook shot. It didn't, but that's how it went down. Thank you.
Hello, Kareem.
Hi.
My name is Sadia. I'm from Bronx, New York, Allerton Avenue off of Gun Hill Road. So this is on behalf of my grandmother, who loves Bruce Lee, and you were in the game of death with Bruce Lee. Could you tell me how it felt and your experience working with Bruce Lee?
Well, you know, I met Bruce when I was going to UCLA, and he was acting in The Green Hornet, which was a TV show, you know, your typical crime show. He drove a crime fighter named the Green Hornet. His name was Kato, and he decided he wanted to start making movies. But he had already developed a different martial art, and some people said, hey, maybe you might want to go study with Bruce. I was fortunate enough to get that opportunity, and I worked with him for 4 years, the 4 years before he died. He was a wonderful human being and a really good person, and I miss him terribly still. Thank you for your question. Yeah.
Hi there. I'm an education major here at K-State, and I am going to teach English language arts. So I was curious if you'd ever considered doing STEAM instead of STEM at your foundation. STEAM includes the arts.
Arts, yes, I know. STEAM the arts are certainly essential for human development because they teach us how to enjoy life. So I don't have anything against the arts, but for kids from really oppressed and unfortunate circumstances, learning how to get a really good job is absolutely important. So I wouldn't say no to STEAM, but I feel that STEM is the essence of it, and if we can get them both taught, that would be wonderful. But I appreciate your question.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
As a New Yorker, 69 Knicks were one of the best teams ever.
You mean the 70 Knicks?
69, 70 Knicks, exactly. Recently, we were treated to a Martin Luther King speech from February 4th by the Dodge Company. They kind of manipulated, well, they kind of used Martin Luther King's words for sales. And I'm trying to wonder, what's your advice, what's your opinion and advice to keep us from doing that, manipulating Martin Luther King's word?
Well, like I said earlier, we have to get to where we understand what Dr. King left us as instructions for the future. we have to start focusing on that as opposed to patting ourselves on the back for having Dr. King as an American. It's great to appreciate him, but some of the things that he told us that we needed to do still need to get done. So I think that we have to, as they say, we got to keep our eyes on the prize. Number 7.
Hi, Kareem. So my question is about Colin Kaepernick. So Nate Boyer, an Army veteran and a former NFL player who influenced Colin to kneel instead of sit during the national anthem, wrote an open letter to Colin this past year asking that he and Donald Trump have a conversation. Do you think a conversation between the two would be productive?
I know for a fact that a conversation between the two of them would be used by the president to feed his base some raw meat. He has no interest in solving any problem. It's very unfortunate that the president of our country is more interested in political partisanship than doing the best for our country. I think that really should be his focus, but who am I to speak? Thank you for your question. Yes?
Hello, Kamal. I would like to ask how you would answer to people who say that the religion of Islam is sexist in itself. They obviously use evidence like women having to wear the hijab. How would you react to that?
Sweetheart, my name is Kareem. And I think you're absolutely right. One of the things that bothers me and all Muslims who understand the faith is the fact that in the Islamic world, women are supposed to have the right to choose their husbands, to petition for divorce, to inherit money and own businesses, and to be treated as equals. And this doesn't happen in the Islamic world. And it's a problem for me and any other Muslim that understands what the Quran really teaches us. So the hypocrisy of a lot of the people that are leaders in the Islamic world is very obvious. And what you're talking about is very obvious. So until we can get those people over there to face up to the fact that they're hypocrites, women in the Islamic world have to deal with this burden. They're just now at the point where they're thinking about letting women in Saudi Arabia drive. This is absurd. It points out the absurdity of some of their positions, but over in that part of the world, you have patriotic, authoritarian regimes who will not give up their grip on power. So that's what we're dealing with. But that's a very accurate question, and thank you for your question.
Thank you, Kareem.
One more question? I think we have time for just a few more questions.
We'll take 4, okay? 5, 4. We'll take one from each.
My mom is getting a degree in education, a PhD in education, and right now she's studying schools inequality between different races. And I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on the social inequality in schools?
Well, I think you're going to have to call her Doc instead of Mom. But no, I think that's great. The fact that she thinks that these subjects are important enough to focus her doctorate on that and to try to get some clarity on this issue, that's what we need in our country. I'm 100% for what she's doing. Tell her good luck and best wishes from me. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Edwin Chris Butler. I'm a junior in sociology. Actually, I'm from Milwaukee and my family is, so growing up, my old man would not stop talking about you, so I can't wait to call him after this and be like, hey, I asked Kareem Abdul-Jabbar a question.
Cool.
But yeah, and also I'm thinking about, I'm really hoping to go to UCLA for my doctoral in sociology. So I guess my question is, after that long introduction, you know, at what point in your life, or maybe a series of moments, did you kind of realize that you yourself could be a tool for positive change, to like improve the lives of others, to encourage others, or just, you know, be a positive force?
I think I got that idea the summer that I mentioned earlier when I took part in that mentoring program. It really changed my understanding of my community, because Harlem was the capital of Black America for so long. Count Basie started his band here in Kansas City, but they got worldwide attention when they got to New York. Duke Ellington started in Washington, D.C. They got to New York, they started playing in Harlem, they got worldwide attention. So understanding what Harlem meant to Black Americans was a big issue for me in enabling me to understand how important my community was. So now the Black community is spread out all over the country. No one community can say that they dominate in being the trendsetter for Black America, but Black Americans like yourself are going to continue to make change. So knowledge is power, and use all that knowledge that you accumulate when you get your doctorate to make positive change. And the Bruins can use all the bright minds that they can get. So be good to have you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yes.
Hi, Kareem. This is Ali Al-Gubari, and I'm from Saudi Arabia. So, as a Muslim, what do you think of those people who are in social media or newspapers and some channels who hate Islam and Muslims and trying to convince other Americans to think that Islam's relate to terrorism? And we can see that when crimes happens, they check if he is a Muslim, oh, that means he's a terrorist, you know? And if he's not Muslims, they call him, hey, that guy has a psychopath or something.
Well, you know, stereotypes are really like shorthand for racists and bigots, okay? So Dr. King told us that we judge people by the content of their character. People from all different philosophies and religions can have great characters, or they can have horrible characters. I always thought that Buddhists were peaceful people who treated everybody the same. I see what's happening in Myanmar and Bangladesh, where they have a genocidal campaign against Muslims in effect, and they are using the same distortions of Buddhism that Muslims that are practices of ISIS and Daesh are using against the people that they hate. Fascism is fascism, whether it's practiced by the Ku Klux Klan or Myanmar Muslims or people who claim to be Muslims from the Middle East. What they're practicing is fascism, the ability of one person or one group to use force to put other people under their heel. That's what it's all about, and that's what we have to fight. All of us, anybody who believes in righteousness, I don't care if they are atheists, Muslim, Buddhist, Jewish, it doesn't matter. We all have to fight this type of evil. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, one point is when that kid asked you about the women's rights and stuff in Middle East and Saudi Arabia and other countries, I would say as a Saudis, I mean, I see like all women in my country has all the rights that they need. I mean, except driving, they let them right now, but I don't see the driving is like in a big issue or let's say a big right to have. I mean, I would say maybe 95% of each woman in Saudi Arabia or each house, they own a driver. So we make them live as an angels, as in a queens. They don't need a driver.
Did you ever hear of the concept of a gilded cage? It's a cage that has diamonds on it, but it keeps a bird inside imprisoned, okay? These women are imprisoned. They can't live their lives. They can't make the choices that they want to make. they have to have a male relative go with them when they walk out of the door to go shopping. It's absurd. It's a distortion of what the Prophet Muhammad was all about.
I believe we're going to have one more question, sir. Number 8, last question over at number 8.
Thank you for your question.
Hi, my name is Kurt, and besides us sharing nice haircuts, yeah, beautiful. I'm probably one of the few people here old enough to have watched you play in college. But the point I wanted to get to is, you mentioned the Tamir Rice tragedy, and I think about Eric Garner and his horrific death at the hands of the New York police for selling Lucy's. And I think about the militarization that takes place in our police force, where we see armored vehicles roaming the streets of St. Louis and Baltimore. And I see this confluence of laws that take advantage of the politically and economically disadvantaged for things like selling Lucy's, and this confluence of that with militarization of the police. I know that's long-winded, but how do you see us moving forward in this? How do we get past this idea that we have to have a military presence in our police force in order to deal with things that are really nonsensical crimes, like selling a Lucy on the street?
Well, I think that when we get to a point where the police force does not look down on the people that they are policing, and instead of looking down on them, look upon them as people that they are there to protect and serve, that will help. And people in the community need to look at the police department not as pigs or oppressors, but look upon them as the people that are here to help us keep order in our communities and give them the respect that they deserve. That mutual respect will build a bridge, and we can overcome this. But until we get to that point where there's communication and the willingness to have the dialogue, we're going to have these problems. We're not going to fix it with tanks and 50 caliber machine guns. We're going to fix it with communication and understanding that we're all Americans and we're all here to have wonderful lives if we can. I think that's the goal. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for your questions. I think that was our last question that we were able to take this evening, and we are so honored and privileged to have you here, Mr. Abdul-Jabbar, and I think with that, we'll end this portion of the event.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you. Go Cats!